Hello everybody again and welcome. Well, today we're taking a deep dive into Nubian culture, that none other than the Nubian Museum in Aswan. And on the way there we find ourselves marooned on a water taxi, literally abandoned in fact. And after that we go on to explore the quarry of the unfinished obelisk and the site where all of the granite for the major Egyptian structures come from, more than 800 kilometers from where they were built. Imagine the logistics behind that. Anyway, come along with me and I'm sure that you'll enjoy it. The Nubian Museum is located in Aswan and has a distinctly Nubian or Southern Egyptian architecture. This is a rather unique. We're trying to get a ferry to the other side of the river over there, and the driver of the boat just took off and went to pray and left us with his boat. Here's our boat, but there's a bloke in the distance who seems to be keeping an eye on us, so he's probably worried we might take the boat. As it happens, I know how to drive a boat, and as you've probably already seen, Kaman is an Arabic speaker, and they didn't even tell him what was going on. When the prayers were finished, we had a little bit more company on the ferry from Elephantine Island to Aswan. Just a short walk from the ferry and passing by people trying to sell you things, we saw one of the many vintage Peugeot taxi station wagons that are used in Aswan. And everybody has to take a photo at the entrance of the museum, even ugly old bastards like me. Next up comes the normal formalities of buying a ticket, and typically foreigners pay more. However, a camera ticket was not needed here, and then the usual security scans, which are best left unfilmed. Making our way into the entrance of the museum proper, there is a collection of saved relics that are simply fascinating. So there's quite a lot going on here, and it's very likely that these objects were never assembled in the one place. We have a ceremonial shrine with a crab-like figure sitting in the middle that's actually said to be a baboon, a representation of the god of wisdom Thorpe. And then we have miniature obelisks that would have been donated by wealthy individuals to temples. And then we have a collection of baboons which actually represents the god Babi. Making our way further along, there is an ancient column, followed by another example of a pressure arch, a couple of tourists, and as soon as you enter the museum proper, there is a gift shop and a very well stocked bookshop. First up, we went to the temporary exhibition hall, which basically means what I show you today mightn't be there tomorrow. While getting one's bearings, there's a lot of reading to do that doesn't particularly make good video, followed by a simple display of pottery from the earliest tombs. There is a striking difference between the sarcophaguses of Upper Egypt and those of Lower Egypt, and I'm battling somewhat to work out the material that this death mask is made of. But the coffin, sarcophagus, I gotta get that right, you can see the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus staring at you. Now united, Lower and Upper Egypt have divided and combined countless times. There's a display on Facts About Elephantine Island, of which I've done a full video on that, along with a water flask from somebody's tomb. So Aswan was the wellspring for all the beautiful granite objects right across Egypt. And it can be seen in the skeletons of the people who worked in the quarries how worn their bones were as a result of carving stone. The crocodile figures you can see are representations of the god Sobek, and to honour him, even crocodiles themselves have been mummified. Sometimes the simplest of objects prove to be the most complex. Now this primitive looking carving is said to be a Nubian ibex, but to my Australian eyes it very much looks like a kangaroo. And apparently the ibexes were very important to the Nubian people. But the question must be asked at this point, is there some tie-in with the Gosford hieroglyphs? I'll leave that question open, but I have made a full video on that subject. This cabinet contains fragments of once beautiful objects. I'm afraid their meaning is lost to me, but they would have meaning. And indeed you will also find some iron tools, proof that the Egyptians didn't only use copper ones. Little things often tell a big story, and this collection of funerary statues speaks of the evolution in the ancient Egyptian religion. There was always a prince of the underworld or a ruler of the underworld. But over time, the title of that individual changed from Ptah to Osiris to Shuti, and each of them are represented here in different guises and from different periods of Egyptian history, one of them being indistinguishable from the other. In another part of the museum, but it made sense to put them together, because essentially they were saying the same thing. In this cabinet we can identify the funerary statues. From the left we have Amun-Ra, second from the left we have Isis, and third from the left we have Osiris, and fourth from the left we have a high-ranking priest along with Ushanti. Yet more funerary objects, a display of severed pottery heads. It is obvious by the decoration on these sarcophaguses that they are of a high rank, but one unusual one is a mummified ram. It was found on Elephantine Island, and it is a representation or an offering to the god Khufu. Feather-looking objects to the left of screen would have once adorned a crown as a nod to Amun-Ra, and the mustache-looking objects again are the representation of the horns of Khufu. The woven structure on the right of screen, I do not know the owner, and it is actually a stylized version of their face, not a representation of one of the Egyptian gods, as it looks to be. The submerged Nubian section of the museum is basically old black and white photos of things we're never likely to see again, as they have been covered by the Aswan Dam. Could be said that this is a shrine to the true cost of the dam. Clearly the Nubians and Sudan lost out big time on account of it, and additionally many things were never ever explored properly. Who knows what treasures lie underneath the silt of the dam, possibly never to be seen again, or maybe not to be seen for thousands of years. This one is a photograph of the pyramid from Elephantine Island, along with some of the ruins and the stout skeleton of an unknown individual. You cannot help but leave that part of the museum with a tinge of sadness, but before us are Egyptian writing implements. It is obvious that the Nubians are very proud of their museum, rightly so, and here is a model so one can view its full splendor. As we enter the main exhibition hall, we're immediately met by Ramesses II. And one has to think of the politics around such places, whereby the big museums in Cairo always want to lay their hands on the best artefacts, pulling rank on smaller regional capitals. Politics aside, the model before us is of the regional temples and buildings of significance nearing the Nile. Clearly there's a lot of them, and I didn't get the opportunity to visit them all. The room has an arrangement of very worn tablets. Stone tools that very possibly predate the dynastic Egyptian period, along with a skeleton which I believe to be human, maybe even a child that's actually fossilizing from that period. So if we predate pottery and metals, we are left with ostrich eggs, and how one would drill a hole in one and it lasts for thousands of years, I do not know. It could have been used for a range of fluids, but very most likely water, along with jewellery that definitely looks machine turned. Through the artwork it can be seen that the Egyptians did have a lathe of types, and you notice the difference in pottery between the north and the south of the country. This pottery seems to have more of an African flavour. Again, I must apologise, the glass cases interfere greatly with my photography. In front of us are a beautiful set of thin-wall pots that at first glance appear to be diorite, but in fact are basalt. Now, allegedly these were made without the services of a lathe and using no metal harder than copper. Yet we are in the Nubian Empire here, and the Nubians defeated the Egyptians militarily, partly on account of their iron swords and iron arrow tips, but they never used them for pottery. Well, that's something I think we need to have a bit of a think about. Continuing on, we have a mixture of jewellery and pottery, and one of those iron swords I was talking about earlier, with the metal definitely not being used to shape stone. You can't but help notice the fineness of the walls on these vases. Now, one thing people often wonder about, why were the Egyptian beer and wine jars round bottom? Well, the obvious answer is that if the drinker couldn't stand up after drinking it, why should the bottle? But the truth is, it's to do with pressure. It meteorates the pressure in the bottle better, and also a porous container placed in sand, it acts as a sort of refrigeration system. These innate objects are known as the Ramesses III prisoner tiles, whereby they would be laid on the floor where the pharaoh and his entourage could walk across the faces of his enemies. We move quickly from prisoners to slaves. The figures are shansis, and they were the slaves of the pharaoh in the afterlife to do the work that he didn't want to do, along with some very heavy gold jewellery which the curators of the museum wouldn't let me take home, unfortunately. Distantly looking like a well, but in fact being a pre-dynastic Egyptian burial site, complete with grave goods. A beautifully carved diorite statue of a pharaoh that someone didn't like. To erase a pharaoh from history, cutting the head off his or her statue was the way they went about it. I couldn't work out whether Kaman felt sorry for him or wanted to be a pharaoh. These anatomically perfect, finely carved soldiers were found in the tomb of Meseti, and it was to serve as his private militia in the afterlife, not a pharaoh but a regional governor, and it is very possible that the headless statue belonged to him. The kneeling statue made of granite is of the pharaoh Shebitsu from the 25th dynasty and known as one of the Black Pharaohs, the period of history when Nubia ruled completely over Egypt and he's in this position to make an offering of beer or milk to the gods. This is an occasion when I couldn't contain my rage or my nerdiness. The fortress of Buhen was known to me, but I've never seen it and I'm never likely to. It is buried under the waters of the high Aswan Dam, and I decided I needed to go one better than the Nubian Museum, doing a full reconstruction as it was in its glory days, not a model of the ruin now flooded. This is the forerunner for every European castle, featuring embattlements, featuring a drawbridge as well as a moat and very thick walls. To defend Egypt some 200 miles or 320 kilometers into Nubian territory, and all of this done some 4,000 years ago, predating everything in Europe by a monstrous margin. I do not know how the dictionary definition goes, but what is the difference between progress and shame? Moving on from a tragedy to the Western Bafufa, which in the Nubian language means any mud brick building, a model of a building that still stands where they practiced their ancient religion. Coming into view is a statue of the royal figure Humaneket. You met his father earlier, Pharaoh Shambaka. By this time the Black Pharaohs had lost a lot of their cachet, but he was still the ruler of the Kush Empire, or what we know as the Nubian Empire. The baboon and the most prominent figure in the footage is the god Babi, said to be the bull of the baboons. The sitting figure is a royal scribe, and the feminine looking figure is said to represent Osiris, although I'm not 100% sure about that. Looks too feminine to me, but it could have also been the case that a person of note made themselves look like Osiris in a statue, even a female. The tablet coming into view speaks of an offering made from the pharaoh to the gods, and the head is said to be a high status head. So now you know what a high status head looks like. I'm sure everybody wondered about just that. It can't be said whether the museum's position was to save electricity or there was possibly vampires in the collection, but the lights were pretty pathetic in areas of it, as can be seen from the footage. Coming into view is a box statue, and the hieroglyph starts Hejet Denesu, meaning an offering from the king to the gods. Coming into view is a very different sort of block statue of an unknown individual. However, the sistrum is of the goddess Hathor. The female statue has the disc of Ra and horns, which would indicate that she is of a royal status. And as always, there is Ramesses II. This box statue is all about appeasing Sobek and features Anukis. She is the female figure, and she's also the daughter of Khuneum. For me personally, this object stirred up more debate than anything else in the Nubian Museum. It is said to be from the Kush Empire of Nauru, with a figure riding an elephant. Now, the debate stemmed from the fact that African elephants are supposed to be untrainable, and in addition, the question reached my mind and I set about proving it. Did the Egyptians use elephants to move stone? Now, every reference material that I could access said they didn't, but this statue does put forward the possibility that they could have. To my eye, this object looks so Asian, but it isn't, and it is in fact a Nubian version of a Sphinx. Very different to the ones you find in the north of the country, but fascinating in appearance. Salvage object from the flooded temple of Garth Hussein, yet another image of Ramesses II, and looking very different to most of them, I might add. Statue from the 25th dynasty, the time of black pharaohs, of Pharaoh Tahaku and his daughter Amenemhis II. And here we have a crystal ball, well, if only. Now I'm sorry, but I just cannot identify this piece, but is either of Islamic origin or ancient Egyptian origin. At the risk of sounding repetitive, you can clearly see the African flavour in this pottery. It is so incredibly different to that found in the northern part of the country. A circular shield and copper-tipped spears. It's my hope that the spears and shield are not put in place for sore losers. What we are looking at here is an ancient Egyptian board game known as in English meaning 20 squares, somewhat different to the famous game of Senet. Here is again another Egyptian pillow, and they look so incredibly uncomfortable. I cannot believe that they couldn't have come up with a better design than that. Nubian history did not stop with the dynastic Egyptian period. It moved forward and moved into the world of Islam. The museum houses textiles and a simply magnificent pot from that era. We go back in time to my earlier episode on Elephantine Island. Here are the models of the temples that existed there from Thutmose III and Amenemhet III. Decoration adorning these horses is absolutely magnificent. So much so that a couple of tourists had to take their photos with them. And yes, we did cheat and use the flash, naughty boy. An Islamic country hidden in a dark corner of the museum are some relics of Christianity from the Coptic Christian period in the region, although a Coptic Christian church still exists in Aswan. These very un-Egyptian looking crowns are from the period or the kingdom of Ballana. Just before the Christian period and just after the Roman one, sort of a confused time in history. Apparently the crowns were found on the heads of the rulers in their tombs. There is also other accompanying jewellery. So over time, the rulers changed more times than you can count. The religion changed, however the work of the tradesmen didn't. And here we have an industrial furnace for smelting metal. Now bear in mind the Nubians were specialists in iron, not copper. Everybody here, including me, is marvelling over this beautiful solid gold jewellery, but what is not filmed is the security guard keeping an eye on us while we are keeping an eye on his jewellery. The model is of a kabot amasal, which is essentially an Islamic prayer space, Nubian style. In the case of a mosque, the dome always faces Mecca, which is the holiest part of the temple. However, the Christians wanted to go one better, having two domes complete with crosses on top. I know what it looks like, but I'm not going to say it here. The plaque on the model gives very little information. It only speaks of a Christian city, most likely one of the artefacts lost in the flooding associated with the Aswan Dam. But one thing will be clearly noticed is the difference in quality between a video camera and a good quality stills camera when I show you the photo of this beautiful Christian artwork. Nubian architecture even today is filled with pressure arches, and this display gives an explanation of their construction, followed by the minaret of a long since lost mosque. Nothing is more important than water in a desert, and that probably reflects the quality and the workmanship put into this water storage container. I apologise that the writing on these tablets is unclear, but they are not covered in hieroglyphs, they are covered in Arabic, along with a model of the mosque from which they come from. Again, another model of a flooded object. Looking at Nubian period dress, one gets the impression that the Nubians must have had very thin necks, judging by the distance across the collar, and a number of other long since flooded temples before we move into the Nubian life display, displaying life as it once was and in some cases still is for the Nubians. And the curators must have had a sense of humour, from women talking, solving the problems of the world, to men standing by idle saphirs, that's water pumps, trying to work out what the women are saying. And by this period of history, the Arab influence can be seen in the pottery, along with a classical looking coffee pot, something we have the Ethiopian Muslims to be thankful for. The irrigation systems of this period, and indeed previous periods, are very complex, with various designs of what in English we would call pumps. From food for the body to food for the mind, children patiently listening, getting lessons on the Quran and life, to merriment and dancing. They cover the full spectrum of Nubian life. Obviously, living and relying upon the Nile, there was a great tradition of boat building. But one of the mysteries to me is, where did the timber come from? The answer is said to be Lebanese cedar. Now, as the crow flies, that's about 1,500 kilometers, and through the kingdom of Byblos. And if we think back to my Egyptian god videos, that's where a god spent some of his time, that being the god Osiris, as a wooden column. With the course of the Islamic period, the jewellery had not lost its golden touch, nor had the metal swords lost their steel sting. And the ladies must have known it was nearing lunchtime, because they were busy preparing a beautiful meal. Kaman was again busy trying to get his head around royalty, and we started our 1.5 kilometre walk to the Aswan quarry of the Unfinished Obelisk. Along the way, I met up with an old friend, a Fiat 131, a car from my childhood and owned by my parents. This 1970s relic was still running and functioning perfect in the Egyptian desert. So you can imagine a scientist and an engineer walking 1.5 kilometers and having a particularly nerdy conversation, and we didn't disappoint. That's exactly what we did. Now, one of the things I didn't really talk about when I was there, that being the King's Chamber in the Pyramid of Khufu, was a study done by John Stuart Reid, who was an acoustic engineer. Now, I don't know whether these results are accidental or they were put there by the Egyptians, but his findings surprised him. He found that the chamber itself had a resonant frequency of 121 Hertz. Nothing at all surprising about that. Any box has a resonance and a frequency attached to it. Now, I'll give you a 3-second listen to what that sounds like. And his findings also was that the sarcophagus itself had a frequency of 117 Hertz. Again, nothing surprising about that. I'll give you 3 seconds to listen to it. When you put these two together, you get something most unusual. I'm using my editing software here. I should have actually explained that earlier. You get what's called a beat. Now, the beat you get when you combine those two frequencies, I'll give you another 3 seconds to listen to it. Now, the interesting thing about this beat is it matches up to human brain waves. Now, was that by design or was that by accident? Who knows? but it's certainly a fascinating fact about the King's Chamber made from the granite from the place where we are going. And just to make things more interesting, when I learnt this, I incorporated it into my video. The music I've been playing in the background, this one, I'm using that very beat, and it is composed by myself. So that is the sound of human brain waves incorporated into Egyptian music, and yes, I am a crazy fool. Anyway, come along with us and we'll explain the history of the quarry, show you the quarry, and try and unwrap some of the mysteries that surround it. By design or by accident, the dead pharaoh's brain is being massaged with the sound in the background. However, there is some reality to the subject. Every engineer watches this video of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The prevailing winds in the resonance of 0.2 Hertz eventually brought this bridge down. Human hearing starts at 20 Hertz. However, if you switch from a sine wave to a sawtooth wave, you'll hear all it takes to bring down a bridge. And here it is. Well, I hope you can't hear the roaring 40s in the background there. After our nerdy conversation, it was time to get on with the history of the site. Now, there are probably three camps on how things were done. There is the official camp by the archaeologists, and then we have a group who introduce aliens, UFOs and machines that there's been no evidence or proof of. I fit into the middle one. In my view, they had much more technology and much greater tools than the official explanation gives us. But proving that is somewhat difficult. But I think for what they achieved with what they had, or supposed to have had, is not realistic in any way. Now, one very good example of this is there's absolutely nothing spooky about cement. We know it, we understand it, we used it. So did the Romans. But during the Dark Ages, when we entered the Renaissance, there was a church that had a spire in Florence, Italy. And they could not construct a cement dome, bearing in mind that the largest cement dome in the world to this day was still made by the Romans, because they'd lost the recipe for cement. So if such a thing can be lost, I believe other technology can be as well. Anyway, have a look at the official history, and I'm sure you'll have your own opinions on it. Please put them in the comments.
The ancient quarry landscape at Aswan, historically documented as Sain or Swenet in ancient Egyptian, meaning trade, is one of the most significant industrial archaeology sites in the world. Spanning roughly 150 square kilometers on both banks of the Nile, its history is a masterclass in ancient materials engineering, logistics, and stoneworking technology. While the region contains various deposits of silicified sandstone and limestone, it is globally famous for its monumental Precambrian rose granite, a highly resilient crystalline plutonic rock formed between 1 and 4 billion years ago deep within the Earth's crust. Chronological history of exploitation. The sheer time depth of human activity at the Aswan quarries is immense, evolving from survivor-driven tool-making to megascale imperial engineering. Late Paleolithic and pre-dynastic origins. 20,000 BC, 3100 BC. Long before monumental architecture, the earliest operations focused on harvesting silicified sandstone for grinding stones, hand axes, and processing tools. Minor pre-dynastic extractions of granite occurred for small vessels and ceremonial palettes, capitalizing on naturally exposed, weathered boulders. The Old Kingdom, structural foundations. 2686 BC, 2181 BC. As state-centralized engineering matured, the demand for Aswan granite surged. Granite from this region was extracted and shipped over 800 kilometers north to serve as heavy structural elements, most notably lining the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza and forming the massive portcullis blocks within elite funerary architecture. The New Kingdom, peak megalithic extraction. 1550 BC, 1077 BC. The Golden Age of quarrying at Aswan. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, and Ramesses II ordered the extraction of colossal monolithic obelisks and statues. Work during this era pushed the absolute physical limits of the bedrock, leaving behind monumental failures like the unfinished obelisk when structural fractures compromised the stone mid-excavation. Greco-Roman and Byzantine expansion. 332 BC to 641 AD. The Ptolemaic and Roman empires industrialized the site further. Romans valued Aswan's decorative monzonite and granite variants for imperial monuments across the Mediterranean. They introduced fire-setting techniques and iron wedging to break the stone along natural geological fault lines running east-northeast to west-southwest. Modern industrialization and archaeological protection. 1960s to present. The construction of the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s rapidly transformed the landscape, bringing industrial development and urban expansion. In 1979, the ancient quarry site was officially recognized and inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, protecting it as an open-air museum. Engineering and extraction mechanics. The physical evidence left in the granite walls provides an exceptionally clear window into ancient stoneworking techniques. Because granite has a high compressive strength and a hardness of 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale, traditional copper or bronze chisels of the Pharaonic period were utterly ineffective for bulk extraction. The dolerite pounding technique. The primary method for clearing bulk granite was continuous mechanical spalling using dolerite balls, spherical, highly dense volcanic rocks weighing between 4 and 12 pounds, sourced from the eastern desert. Pounding and spalling, workers stood in designated grid spaces and repeatedly dropped or slammed these dolerite balls against the granite face. The localized impact crushed the quartz and feldspar crystals into a fine powder. Scoop marks, this rhythmic, repetitive striking pattern resulted in the highly distinct scoop marks, typically measuring roughly 40 by 40 centimeters, matching a comfortable human arm swing seen throughout the trenches of the unfinished obelisk. The test holes, scattered across the quarry floors, are deep, cylindrical test holes ranging from 1 to 1.5 meters wide and up to 5 meters deep. These show the same rock-on-rock carving signatures and were utilized by ancient surveyors to assess the internal consistency of the bedrock, checking for hidden fissures or faults before initiating a massive monumental extraction. The unfinished obelisk. The most famous artifact on site is the unfinished obelisk, likely commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut. Had it been successfully freed from the bedrock, it would have stood approximately 42 meters, 137 feet, tall and weighed an estimated 1,090 to 1,200 tons, making it nearly one-third larger than any Egyptian obelisk ever erected. The project was abandoned when a major structural crack developed through the heart of the stone block. This preserved the perfect, mid-process snapshot of the engineering workflow. The side trenches are fully cleared, and the ochre-colored leveling lines painted by ancient scribes remain visible on the granite faces. Logistics and the river transport system. Extracting a 1,000-ton monolith is only half the engineering challenge. Moving it to the Nile required a highly coordinated transport infrastructure. Recent geological and radar surveys conducted by international research teams have identified an ancient canal system directly linking the northern quarry zones to the Nile River. The slipways, megaliths, were cleared from their beds, levered onto massive wooden sledges, and hauled down constructed ramps lined with slick, wet Nile mud acting as a lubricant. The harbor basin, the transport ramps led directly down into dedicated harbor basins or canals. During the peak summer flood season, the Nile's water level rose dramatically, filling these artificial basins. Heavy lift barges, these allowed massive, specially constructed timber transport barges to float directly alongside or over the submerged slipways. The stone blocks were secured to the vessels while stable, and as the waters leveled out, the barges transported the immense structural weight downriver to major construction sites like Karnak, Luxor, and Giza.
So let's have a look at the grounds themselves and what they show and what you can see. I didn't spend that much time there. Well, a quarry is basically boring, but what makes this one interesting is the history and the amazing things that come out of there. Our arrival of the quarry of the unfinished obelisk, and everywhere you look around you can see that the rocks are straight where different sorts of monuments must have been carved from. Decoding the site in any sort of reasonable way is bewildering. This is a quarry that has been in constant operation from 20,000 years ago up until the 1960s, and there was an enormous range of techniques used for rock extraction. So it's difficult to work out just what the dynastic Egyptians did and didn't do and the technology that they used. So the sawtooth pattern clearly was not done with the dolerite pounding, nor was the indentations as shown. But these could be Roman, they could be anything. And I don't think the level of precision in Egyptian statues is in any way reflected in the way these bits of stone have been ripped out with dolerite pounders. Do you? As you look around the site, yes, there are plenty of dolerite pounders, and I'm not disputing that they weren't used at all. And when you look at the star of the show, the unfinished obelisk, you can see scoop marks. But there's other things that could have scooped it out rather than pounding it to death. Well, at least that's my opinion. Maybe they've got the dating a little bit wrong and they went about it a different way because they managed to crack this one. A possibility. A brand new statue commissioned by the Pharaoh. In case anybody's wondering about the music in the background, apparently they used music to synchronize the workers in Egyptian quarries and moving Egyptian structures. So I composed this one to reflect this, and then we come upon a beautiful photograph of our home before we settled down and had a nice cold beer. Well, I really hope you liked that. If you did, please like and subscribe. It does make a difference, and I welcome comments, criticisms, and you can even tell me I'm doing a good job. I'm sure a few people do that. Next up, we're going to cover the Philios Temple. Now, it's an amazing place. It was one of the temples that was saved when the Aswan High Dam was constructed. But that's the end of the video, so as always, there's plenty more to come. Stay safe and please like and subscribe. Cheers.